Guys, the last few months have been hard for us PC enthusiasts, and finding a graphics card for its actual MSRP has been extremely difficult. As some of you know, that has been due to the recent pandemic. Manufacturing and logistics have become really expensive, and while many graphics cards are selling for $100 to $200 over their MSRP, others have been completely out of stock and are pretty much unavailable, which is devastating for PC enthusiasts wanting to build a decent gaming rig. One graphics card where some versions have managed to dodge the recent supply shortages though is the Radeon RX 580, which is still available and selling for its MSRP of about $170. Now when it was released, it was one of the graphics cards which were great for mining cryptocurrencies. And because of that, its price shot up to almost $500 in early 2018, and no one in their right mind would choose the RX 580 to build a gaming PC back then. But times have changed, and the RX 580 may just be the best option for those looking to build a new budget gaming PC capable of 1080p at 60 FPS. With 2304 CUDA cores, a boost clock of 1340 MHz out of the box, and 8GB of GDDR5 memory, we are getting a nice upgrade over its predecessor, the RX 570, which is currently priced just $5 less. Especially the 8GB of VRAM is a strong argument for the RX 580, as most AAA games being released lately are using at least 4 to 6 GB, while many other graphics cards in the lower budget segment do not even have 6 GB of memory. For those playing esports titles, this is not the greatest selling point, as you're most likely going to be turning those texture settings down for those crispy FPS games. But if gaming at ultra settings is more your thing, this is one reason to choose the RX 580 over any other graphics card in its price segment. I've got the XFX GTS XXX edition here, which I'm really impressed with. Unfortunately, this is one of the versions that have gotten their prices increased recently, so if you want to buy it yourself, I would rather recommend the Pulse RX 580 from Sapphire. As they are almost identical, you should always consider the one with the lowest price right now. In the stress test, this card barely touched 75 degrees, even once overclocked. During all of that, the fans were also barely spinning, creating almost no noise whatsoever. The RX 580 requires an 8-pin power connector, as its power draw is rated at 185 watts maximum. On the back, this model has 3 display ports 1.4 and 1 HDMI port 2.0, which is enough to support 3 4K monitors or 4 1080p monitors. So let's take the RX 580 through a few titles and see how it does in 1080p gaming. The test system also features a Ryzen 5 1600 on a B450 motherboard and 16GB of 3200 MHz RAM. If you want to see gaming benchmarks of other hardware parts, be sure to hit that subscribe button, as that will come out in the next few months. Now, I didn't feel it was completely appropriate to test this particular card at ultra settings for all games, as it did struggle a little bit here and there, so we do have a little bit of a mix in this testing. Starting with League of Legends, however, and here I was able to play at max settings without any problems. Here the RX 580 is averaging 181 FPS with bottom 1% and 0.1% of frames at 157 and 146 respectively. I know League of Legends isn't a particularly hard game to run, but it is a very popular one, and here the RX 580 is absolutely crushing 1080p. Moving on to Call of Duty Warzone, here we are looking at max settings in a normal multiplayer match. Here the RX 580 is able to push above 70 FPS on average, and we see that extend beyond 100 FPS on low settings. Bottom 1% and 0.1% results were a little bit low for max settings, but turning the settings down improved those quite easily. Another game the RX 580 handled ultra settings at was Valorant. As this is another esports title, I was not surprised to see another very high average of 192 FPS. The frame rate was also very smooth, with bottom 1% and 0.1% results very close to the average. Not much else to say, but the RX 580 was easily capable at 1080p at this title. In Witcher 3 I tested max settings and low settings. At high settings I felt that the frame rate was a little bit low, but turning the settings down delivered a very playable and enjoyable gaming experience at 1080p. The game looks sharp, and I didn't feel any stuttering or frame rate drops after that. At max settings the RX 580 delivered an average of 53 FPS, while the average at low settings is 94. Bottom 1% and 0.1% results were also relatively close to the averages for both settings. Path of Exile is a title that is very demanding on max settings, but not really at low settings. Still, at max settings, the RX 580 could reach more than 70 FPS, while I had an average of 184 FPS at low settings. The bottom 1% and 0.1% were a little bit low for max settings, but fine at low settings. I didn't see a huge difference in visual quality between low and max settings, and I was a little bit surprised about these results, but nevertheless, the RX 580 is definitely capable of playing this title at 1080p. And Fortnite did also prove to be no problem for this graphics card. Even at ultra settings in open space, the RX 580 delivered a fairly solid gaming experience. At ultra settings I got 61 FPS on average, with the bottom 1% and 0.1% results being not far off. And since I expect some of you to be playing this FPS game on lower quality presets, I also tested low settings. And here the RX 580 pushed easily beyond 200 FPS, which is really impressive. So it's definitely capable here as well. Overall, I think the Radeon RX 580 from AMD is the best budget gaming graphics card you can buy right now. With his little brother the RX 570 being priced at around $160 at the moment, I would highly recommend investing the extra bucks and stepping it up to the RX 580. A few months back there were many good budget graphics cards, but pricing has changed everything, and right now the RX 580 reigns supreme for price to performance. In late 2020 and probably throughout 2021, I think the RX 580 is definitely a worthy graphics card. I'd be very happy to put this in a budget build myself, but of course I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section below. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.